before January 8th. We brought it in October.
That was when we had a press conference. Really?
We had a press conference October 16th.
Oh, October 16th. Okay, fabulous. Thank you for...
Yes.
Good afternoon. My name is Michelle Gross, and I'm president of the organization Communities United Against Police Brutality. We are one of the coalition partners in Minneapolis for a Better Police Contract, and so that's why we're here today. Back in October, we brought forward a list from the community of 14 recommendations that would revise the current collective bargaining agreement between the City of Minneapolis and the Minneapolis Police Federation. These recommendations would improve policing issues, decrease costs, and lead to better working conditions for the officers themselves. They were overwhelmingly supported by the members of the City Council. Naturally, we wanted to watch the process as the city went into negotiations with the Police Federation so that we could see our recommendations go across the table. So we began to make plans to attend the negotiating sessions. Union contract negotiations are open to the public. However, Laura Davis, the city's labor relations manager, dragged her feet on sharing the dates and times and locations of those sessions. We learned that the city and the Federation made a dirty deal as part of their process agreement to prevent the public from observing. Then they took the negotiations and the mediation specifically to block the public. We're here to say we are not going to stand for it. Today we bring our concerns directly to Ms. Davis, an appointee of Mayor Fry, and let her know that the community is not going to stand for this. She seems to have forgotten that the community has a stake in this contract, and we're here to remind her. So that's what we're here for today. We'll be bringing a letter to Ms. Davis demanding data that we've already requested back in January related to the proposals that have gone across the table between the city and the Police Federation, and also to demand to know future mediation and negotiation dates. So that's why we're here, and that's what we'll be doing. Thank you. I'll bring up now Kimberly Milliard, also with the coalition.
Good afternoon. My name is Kim Milliard. I am with Minneapolis for a Better Police Contract. As Michelle said, we started this work about a year ago, and the reason this work began is that for years we have gone to the City Council, especially when there's been shootings by police of civilians and other police misconduct, and we have asked and begged and pleaded for accountability, and time again their response to us was similar to the response in most major cities, which is that the police union contract prevents us from doing anything about it. And in Minneapolis we actually have a police federation contract, not a union, but they're very similar. And so we're here to say that we, as members of the public, are allowed to have safety. Okay, we deserve that. And whenever there's a contract between the city and a public agency, we, the public, are the beneficiaries of that contract. And when things go poorly, when there's bad policy, when there's misconduct, we are also the ones who suffer the most from it. And we want to say that a bad process leads to bad outcomes, and so you can negotiate all you want and you can do things in back rooms, but if the public isn't allowed into it, if our voices aren't heard, if the things that we're bringing up as issues that we see on the ground are not being listened to, then that's going to have a bad result. And so we began a year ago. This is the police contract. It's all tabbed up, and I've got all sorts of markings in it, highlights, notes. We began scouring it and looking at what are the common sense changes that should be made. And none of the things that we've come up with should be considered controversial. They're very common sense and have support from a wide base of people. Our top 3 priorities are to eliminate officer fatigue. I don't know if most people realize this, but unlike truck driving or airplane piloting or a host of other jobs where public safety is a factor or should be a factor, there are no limits on the number of hours that police officers can work right now. And we understand, studies have shown that when people are exhausted, when they're overworked, their judgment is impaired. They're more likely to make mistakes. A situation that could be de-escalated might become easily escalated just simply because of the irritability that comes from being tired. And so we want to make sure that there aren't ethical breaches and other misconduct based on exhaustion. The second priority is mandatory mental health screenings. We understand that policing is a very stressful job, whether it's an officer showing up to a domestic dispute or showing up in a park where a child is not breathing and is unresponsive, or appearing on the scene of a really significant car crash, sometimes with fatalities. Those things would stress anybody out. And there's no provision for regular psychological testing in the current contract. And so our recommendation is that mental health screenings be conducted every 3 years. And then finally, we hear a lot of things in the news about how Minneapolis needs more police in this part of town or that part of town, and the solution seems to be promoted by Mayor Fry, well, we need more police. And what people don't seem to realize is that the current contract, the way it is, allows 70% of police officers to choose their own assignments, which means that the city, the police chief, do not have the flexibility to put staff, to put personnel where they're needed and where they would best fit according to their skill levels and expertise and experience. And so these are not just requests, they're really demands, and we're following through with this to make sure that they're heard and to make sure that they're included in the bargaining negotiations. Thank you.
And now we have Dave Bicking, who is also with Communities United Against Police Brutality and is a coalition member as well. Dave?
Thank you. I just want to go through a few of the details that show that the city is actively, I'd say, collaborating with the Federation to make sure that the suggestions we brought forward are not incorporated into the contract, or at least they are hiding any efforts from us. We want to monitor the progress. We've been working on this. I've been working on this for about a year. We now, as the negotiations are taking place, want to monitor the progress, and we want to know that the city is actually advocating for the changes that many city council members have agreed with. Negotiations for public employees are public. The law states so that those are public meetings unless decided otherwise by the Commissioner of the Bureau of Mediation Services. So there is one member of our group who is a negotiator for public employees, teachers in particular, who has talked to us about how their negotiations are open to the public. Union members can come to see how the union leadership is doing with negotiations, and members of the public are free to attend those meetings. And those meetings have been open. Typically, the negotiations with the Police Federation have been closed, but only because no one's been paying attention. This is a new thing for the public to get involved to the extent that we have at this particular time. So we want to make sure that something is coming from this. I sometimes picture a negotiating table with both sides, chairs on the same side of the table. We fear it may be like that. So, we are, by law, allowed to be in those meetings. The early meetings of the negotiations, starting in September, were never noticed. So, and despite repeated requests, we were never told the times, dates, and locations of those meetings until many, many months after they had taken place. That doesn't allow us into the negotiations. We also found out recently that there was an agreement that was negotiated at the very first negotiating meeting and ratified at the second negotiating meeting, and that agreement gave a list of the people who could be present at the negotiations. There's a provision about visitors, and it says visitors may be used with approval of both parties. It's been made clear to us that we are not visitors who would be approved by probably either party. To do that is not only keeping the public out, but it is a clear violation of the open meeting law. something we need to pursue for this contract and probably other contracts in the future. So we were kept out of those. One thing that is public is what the proposals are that are passed across the table in negotiations. We're not allowed to know what either side is discussing in private about the negotiations, and that makes sense. They need to keep their negotiating discussions private so that they have, strength in the negotiations. But the law is clear that even though those discussions are private, anything which has been brought to the table is public data. We have requested that data. We have not received it. So we know nothing of what happened in negotiations. As it turns out, that wasn't sufficient for the Federation. They found out that we were thinking of coming. And as a result, they sent a letter to the city saying that they wanted to take this to mediation, and they said that, that this was based on keeping the public out. That was their specific ask. There's a process for negotiations to go into mediation. Those mediations are conducted by the Bureau of Mediation Services. That bureau has a petition, a process by which one side or the other can ask for mediations. It's a regular form. One of the important things on the form is that it asks concise statement of the nature of this dispute and unresolved issues. As it turns out, in response to a data request, which of course we wouldn't have received otherwise unless they were required, we found out that the letter sent by, or an email sent by the Federation to the Bureau of Mediation Services just said, we'd like to have mediation. It did not include the form, and it gave no reason whatsoever for the mediation. In fact, it stated that while progress is being made on some issues, we want to go to mediation. Mediation should happen when the negotiations have come to an impasse. They never indicated that they were at an impasse, and in particular, they never indicated that keeping the public out was any part of their strategy or desire whatsoever. So the commissioner got this email, and of course the Federation notified the city and copied the email to them. At this point, the city could reply and say, hey, we want to keep this open to the public, or hey, we don't think we need mediation yet because we're still issues that we can negotiate without needing a mediator. The Bureau of Mediation Services is not required to provide mediation unless they believe it is in the public interest. They made no attempt to see if it was in the public interest. They just ratified it and said, okay, there will be mediation. And because we submitted a data practice request, we have all the correspondence, unless stuff was withheld, we have all the correspondence from the city. There is no correspondence from the city indicating that contested having this go to mediation. So they also were fine with shutting out the public by this subterfuge. Interestingly, the letter that we saw sent to the city that said, we want to keep this away from the public. That letter was not sent to the Bureau of Mediation Services, and they did not have that at the time they made the decision. We have since sent that letter to the Bureau of Mediation Services and received no response. So we don't know what's going on behind the scenes. Mediation is private. It's not private by law. It's up to the Commissioner of the Bureau of Mediation Services. But the Commission has established a principle that all mediation is closed, and that's been the case since, I think, 1986. So at this point, the mediation is closed. We don't know what's going on. We can't even find out the times the mediation is happening, just to verify that it is happening and how frequently. We have no idea of what issues were taken to mediation. So the Bureau, however, does state that when the contract is finally ratified, that there should be a public process for that. The Bureau of Mediation Services recognizes on its website that there is a public interest in contracts for public employees. And they say that the contract may not be ratified until the full document is finalized in mediation or even arbitration, if it should go to that. Not until the full document is finalized, so that the public can then weigh in at that point. So far, in past Federation contracts and probably all employee contracts, the city has not done that. The city has been, the executive committee approves the contract, but they aren't really approving the contract. They're approving an executive summary, which states a few things about the pay raises and a couple of new terms. It may be months after that till the contract is actually finally written and ready for a signature. So they're just approving a general idea. We found in the past that general idea is often not a very good representation of what is finally negotiated. We are going to hold the city to the principles of an open government where public employee contracts are public information and the public can weigh in. And we are, in our letters, urging that that contract be made available in its final form in time for the public to influence the decision whether to approve it. And we urge the City Council to only approve that contract if it includes the very important provisions that we have come up with and have been advocating for. Thank you.
Thanks. So as Dave mentioned, we have had a real problem with getting the city to provide data that they are required by law to provide. So one of the kinds of things that they haven't provided to us are any of the documents passed across the table or any of the provisions of the contract as passed across the table. Once some matter or issue is passed across the table, it's public data. We have not been able to get the city to provide that to us. Another thing that they have failed to provide to us is the dates of mediation and negotiation. As Dave mentioned, they told us about the mediation dates after they'd already happened. Now, how can people go to the negotiating dates? How can people go to those dates if you only get notified of them after they happen? The city failed to publish those dates in any way, and that's a violation of the open meeting law. So we are going to be holding them accountable for that. But today we are going to go in and give a second demand letter to Laura Davis, who is the labor relations manager for the city of Minneapolis, for those exact items that they owe us from our data request back in January. And so we're going in here today to hand off this letter to Ms. Davis and to insist that she actually follow the law. So that's what we're here for. So thank you. Okay. So, shall we get ready to go inside the office? Okay, let's gather our things and.
This is Nico from Unicorn Riot. We're here live in downtown Minneapolis at the Human Services Center, I believe. We're outside of the Human Resources office where Laura Davis's office is. Laura Davis is the head of the collective bargaining agreements and those types of things within HR. This again is Minneapolis Police Department is having a new contract.
Thank you. And this is something we weren't planning to give to the entire crowd of media, but hey, here's special.
Sweet, thank you
this is the data we got from the city indicating that the all data about the going to mediation. Okay. As I say, it just has the email from the Federation, and then in the back it has the email that says that that they wanted to keep it private. So
okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for the
Well, thank you for coming.
For sure.
Very helpful. Very helpful.
Okay, you ready?
Get this out. It's time to go in.
We'll post this letter on our website. Walking into the building right now, to the office.
You do?
Yes.
Well, I can give her a call.
Yes, that'd be great. Thank you.
See if she's available.
Oh, that would be great. Oh, I like your map.
Thank you. Hi, I have a group of people that would like to deliver a letter to you. Okay, not a problem. She's unavailable, but I can accept it for her.
Oh, she's not
She plans
unavailable.
to be unavailable.
She just told you, she's just on the phone telling you there, so I don't think she's unavailable. Ask her if she'd please have the courtesy to meet with a group of members of the public.
Well, it's unfortunate that I'm not able to do that for you.
Well, I'm going to ask you if you would, please, because I think that's, she has done her best to avoid any contact with the public, including providing us with data that we requested back in January and that we're legally entitled to. And so we think it's, pretty inappropriate for her to refuse to meet with us. So would you please be so kind as to give her a call and ask her if she could reconsider?
I am not able to do that. She's currently in a meeting. That's the only way she was able to answer the phone.
Do you know when her meeting might be done?
That would be private.
No, actually, people's schedules, government official schedules are not private. That's public data.
Well, I don't know everything.
Well, I expect
you
that
find out?
you don't, but I wouldn't expect you to, and I certainly don't want you to risk your job. But we're asking you to please make her available to the public. That's all. And we're not going to beat her up or anything like that. We're just here to give her a letter and to speak briefly with her. It would take her all of 5 minutes of her precious time.
I'll see what I can do.
Okay, thank you. You take the camera and video take all of this.
So again, we're outside.
It's absolutely our intention to be on camera and be on video.
We're here inside of office of Laura Davis. Here she comes, I think.
Hi there.
Can I help you?
Yes, we're here to see Miss Davis.
Okay. Are you asking for her to come out?
Or
This
we
is
can
not
go to
her.
Whatever you would prefer.
Okay, let me see if that's an
Yeah,
option.
we need about 3 minutes of her time, that's all. Thank you.
And they're asked for 3 minutes at a time, 3 to 5 minutes. See if Miss Laura Davis will come up.
Be here first.
We can stress this information is very time sensitive.
Yes.
You can see they're actually watching the live stream. It's on pause right now.
She's currently not available, but I can accept whatever you wanted to
No,
hand
we've
her on
already
her
discussed
behalf.
this with the other gentleman. I asked him when she would be available, and he said that was private, which is simply untrue.
Okay.
Public officials' calendars are public data. But we'll wait, we want to see her, and she could make us go away very quickly by giving us about 3 minutes of her time.
Okay. I'll try to communicate that message as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
She was for engaging with the public rather than shutting them out.
Yes,
Now's the time to do it.
Yes,
So
yes.
Where's my letter to
only-
sign?
only help yourself.
I have a sign for this.
Can I step in here next time she pops out and just get a job interview? Got to.
Oh, of course.
Appreciate it.
No, we don't want you to
You have
not.
an interview?
Yeah.
Oh, with Laura?
No.
Oh.
No. But
Well, we don't want
she's
you to.
serving you guys. I just
No,
want to go
but
on
we don't
the
want you to
radio.
miss your job interview
Yeah,
and
we're not
not be on time. We're not trying to mess
Oh,
up
you're
your future prospects or anything,
Good
We
by
wouldn't
me.
do that.
All good by me.
What department are you looking for a position with?
Housing.
Needed, very needed,
Yes.
absolutely needed. We wouldn't. It has a note that says you can contact the person that you're here to visit if you like. There's a note here that says there's a.
Yeah, I don't know which person it is.
Oh,
I think
okay.
Somebody to talk to the girl at the front counter.
Oh,
Okay.
hopefully she'll be back very soon.
It's just like nobody's at the desk. You could.
Yeah, lift the phone and contact.
But yeah, you have to know who it is.
Hi. You know what? This gentleman here is actually here for a job interview, so we're going to let him jump in right now. So
I didn't realize we had a protest that was allowed inside this room.
this is a
But-
government. It's not a kind of
Oh,
protest.
I see signs.
So this gentleman here is actually here for job interview. We don't want to interfere with
I'm not going to videotape him.
Diversion tactic, and we're not
Not
going
to mention it's a public building,
Yeah,
a public
right.
office in a public building, and you can tell it's public because of the glass and everything security that keeps us out of any other part.
Right.
Therefore, if that is private and
This
you
is
have all the
public.
security here, that kind of defines this as public.
Yes.
Oh, okay, I got it.
Good luck.
Yep.
chanting. Are we yelling? I think we're being really, really pleasant, and if they want us to have a protest, we can turn this into a protest. We can show them. We can show them.
Press conference?
Yeah.
Actually, we do.
And that's just the tactics begin with peace.
Again, we're outside the office of Lord Davis, bargaining agreement head, trying to get a quick meeting about the demands that the community's bringing about the new contract for the Minneapolis police.
Apparently we're not welcome during MSP Welcome Week. Isn't that funny?
And here we scheduled this just for the welcome week.
Yes, is that funny?
At first, the secretary that was sitting in the desk said he could not let anybody speak to her. She wasn't free, but she answered the phone. And then the community asked for like 5 minutes. He went back, came out with another person. The other person listened, and a few minutes later,
But we're not being welcomed. Very sad.
Well, and I think the back that says all are welcome here, but apparently that doesn't actually apply to us.
No.
All except you people are welcome here. Yeah. And a little,
Footnote.
all except you folks are welcome here. You know, it kind of speaks to the training if you don't know that this is a public space, and if you don't know that members of the public are allowed in the space. It kind of speaks to poor training, doesn't it?
And if you think a group of several are a protest,
Yeah. Looking for a job thing?
Well, it looks like the color coded, the white collar and the blue collar jobs.
Is that funny?
I think she's on her way up.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very
I appreciate
much.
that. Thank you.
Appreciate your help.
I love her scarf. It's a pretty scarf.
so can you tell me who Laura Davis again is?
Laura Davis is the labor relations manager for the city of Minneapolis. She is an appointee of Mayor Fry, and she is the person who is actually negotiating on behalf of the city with the Minneapolis Police Federation. So her role in this whole thing is crucial, and the fact that she has chosen essentially to block the public from having access or involvement is really appalling. And so that's why we're insisting on seeing her and not just leaving a letter and going away. She needs to face her public.
Is this the first time you all have faced her?
Yes, it is.
This is the first time.
Yes.
This is the first time that the public has been involved in any of this with the police federation contract. The public's been involved in other union negotiation, but as Dave said in his speech out there, up until, like, even when we were meeting with city council members last fall, they said, oh, like, we're not even allowed in. Like, I don't know how. And so there was this public perception that we're not allowed in. And that's in direct conflict with Minnesota open meeting laws. And yeah.
Exactly. So it's, we decided that it was time to be part of this. You can't spend a year developing recommendations and not know whether they even get brought up.
Right.
That's deeply unfair. And because the public does have access legally, we should take advantage of that access. So this is really important to be here and to be talking about what is going on, behind closed doors, because they don't need to be closed doors. So, we can't get change unless we...
Hi, everyone.
Hi there.
Hi, thank you for
Hi, you're Michelle.
Davis? Yes,
Laura
I am.
Davis. Good to meet you.
Pleased to meet you. Do you mind sitting with us for about 2 or 3 minutes?
Sure, I could do that. I'm rushing off to another meeting.
Yes,
but I
of
did
course.
want to come out and see
We'll
what you had
respect your
for
time.
me.
Yes, we'll respect your time. I just want to
Sure.
a second.
Feel free to have a seat.
Okay, so we just have a letter to share with you. We have been requesting information about the process related to the Police Federation contract. And we have a lot of concerns about the fact that the city has dragged its feet in terms of giving us the dates and times and locations of first the negotiation sessions, which were open to the public, but we couldn't find out when they were or how to be in them. We didn't intend to disrupt those things in any way. We simply wanted to observe so that we could understand what was happening with the recommendations that we had brought forward. We announced those recommendations back in October, and plenty of time for them to be included in the contract. And again, we spent a year developing those things, and they were thoughtfully developed based on evidence-based best practices.
It was definitely clear to me that a lot of work and a lot of thought went into developing those recommendations, no question.
Right. So you can understand why we would want to know if they were actually being brought to the table.
Yes.
And unfortunately, because we cannot seem to get data in a timely manner, we are having problems finding out if our recommendations have even been brought to the table. And we have concerns about that. And, obviously as members of the public, we took time out of our working days to come down here. We are basically asking to have our concerns recognized and addressed. And particularly, we have asked back in January for all of the proposals that were passed across the table, which we understand to be public. And we had also asked for dates, times, and locations of all the negotiating sessions and now the mediation sessions.
And then you probably know that that's all going through the city clerk's office, and that data request is in their purview.
Right, but they then share it to the department and ask the department to provide that information.
I actually provided the information to them because they wouldn't have known the dates that we had mediation
Right, of
sessions.
course.
So I provided that information, and I don't know the status of whether that's all been provided to you or not. In fact, I sent an email yesterday or today just asking about the status of that, because that's not normally something that I would know when they answer a data request. That involved work that I'm responsible
we got some
for.
of the things that we requested in January, but we didn't get the rest of these matters. Also, we're going to ask you to consider this to be a standing request so that, as things change, as you add new negotiation, or rather mediation dates, that you would then inform us of those mediation dates as part of this standing request. And also, as proposals are passed across the table, we would like to have access to those as well, because again, we have no way to monitor this process to understand whether the things that we have developed are even being considered as part of this contract.
Well, and one thing I can tell you is that we're engaged in a process called interest-based bargaining, and if you wanted to Google that, you could learn a little bit more about how it works. It's not a traditional bargaining in the sense that we hand proposals back and forth across the table. We work together to address issues. And so there really are not proposals in the traditional sense of what you would see in traditional labor contract negotiations. It's rather we identify issues, we identify interests, we identify potential solutions. It's really a collaborative way of trying to negotiate a labor contract. We do this with several other of our large groups in the city, and it often yields better results than what we might see in just simple traditional bargaining, passing our proposals across the table.
Okay. Well, then where does that make room for the proposals that we have brought forward, which, by the way, are really supported by the City Council? We took the time to really go and meet with every council member.
And I can tell you I have too, and I have read and studied all of your proposals. I can't tell you substantively more than that, other than they're really excellent, they're really clearly well thought out, and we value having your proposals. I value having the items that you have recommended. I think there were 14 of them in the document that I had. So yes, I've spent time looking at your proposals, and maybe it's important for you all to know that. And I know how much work it takes, particularly with a contract of this magnitude, how much work goes involved in documenting and creating the proposals that you do.
And we are all volunteers too.
And
No one paid us to do this.
Yes.
We simply want to have a better city.
Yes.
So then what assurance can you give us that these proposals are actually being brought forward?
Well, I can't really go into details about what the issues are on the issues list. So what I can tell you is that I thought many of the suggestions that you had were very, very good. I can tell you that some of the suggestions you had were already on my lists of issues, and some were not. And we spent a lot of time looking at the suggestions that you had and studying them carefully. I can let you know that, but beyond that, I'm not comfortable saying a lot more about what the issues are that are on the table.
Okay.
Being discussed.
I guess I have one last question.
Sure.
And that's this. In years past, there's been a practice of giving the city council members a sort of an executive summary of the contract, and then they voted basically on that. According to the Bureau of Mediation Services' own website, the document has to be fully developed and available for review by the public and by the members of the city council, which of course represent us, before it is voted on. So that practice of voting on an executive summary, oftentimes which was not actually reflective of the final contract, is an improper practice. So I guess I'm asking you if you intend to make sure that the entirety of the contract is available before it's voted on.
Well, we have a total of 22 labor contracts, so we go through the executive summary and the executive approval process the same way for all of the contracts. It's not different for the Police Federation than it is with our other labor units. And we submit to the clerk's office the executive summary of what will be at the upcoming executive meeting 9 or 10 days before that meeting. And so that executive summary is out there on the calendar of upcoming council meetings. So folks ought to have access and be able to read the executive summary before the executive committee meeting when they're reviewing, when they're talking about the summary.
I'm sorry. If I could just add real briefly, there's nothing wrong per se with approving the executive summary, but it's not a substitute for approving the contract, especially according to the Bureau of Mediation Services. You can do that along the way as a process of letting the negotiators know you're on the right track. But to have that as a substitute for a final approval, which we have not seen done in the past, is not proper according to the Bureau of Mediation Services, where they say that mediation is private, but because it is private, this must be done at the end of the process so that people can see the final contract before the final approval is given. And there is no such process here. I also wanted to say...
And I want to stop because when you say this must be done, I want to make it clear what must be done. What must be done is the provision of the entirety of the contract, not just an executive summary, so that the public has the ability to view that and that we have the ability to communicate with our city council members our expectations around some approval.
Well, and I'll have to talk to someone at the BMS about that to get their perspective on it, because I can tell you we've had other contracts that we've resolved in mediation, and we have not had the contracts completely written and available to anyone prior to the executive summary. I mean, the executive summaries, to me, we try to be as detailed and give as much of the key important information as possible, knowing that that's the easiest way for someone to learn about what's happened than to read the 85-page labor contract.
It's good to have both. Just like
I understand.
Any document might have an executive summary. It doesn't substitute for the document. And we're saying this process has been done wrong, according to the Bureau of Mediation Services, for as long as we can remember. So it's not that past practice is okay.
Sure. Well, thank you for that. Thank you for that, because if that's accurate, that is news to me. I've been in this role for 2.5 years. This is the way we've been doing it since I got here. So if that is a not accurate process, it's news to me, and I will certainly be looking out and checking in with the Bureau, because it is certainly not our intention to do anything that isn't complying fully with the law in all respects. And I hope you understand that, that's where I'm coming from.
Okay.
We can email you the quote of that provision.
That would be really helpful. Yes, I can give you my...
I have a quote here from the law about the information is passed across the table. It says labor relations information is classified as non-public. But when it defines labor relations information, it means management positions on economic and non-economic issues that have not been presented. And it says, so labor relations information does not include management decisions that have been presented during the collective bargaining process, and it actually uses the term here that have not been presented during the collective bargaining process or interest arbitration.
Right.
So the law treats the two as exactly the same, whether it's bargaining process or an interest arbitration. Anything that's been presented to the other side is public data according to the law 13.37. So
Well,
we could email you that provision as well.
Yes,
because I
and-
think there must be something during the interest bargaining process that you say where a side says, hey, we would like to see this in the contract. You can't negotiate without some presentation of positions. So those should be public data, and as I say, we could email you that provision.
Certainly, and again, I'm working closely with our clerk's office, who are the experts really on what is the data that should be provided and what is the data that's public and private. That is not fully within my purview.
And these processes have been done, in our opinion, wrong for decades. So it's not your position. You've apparently been following the past practice, but there comes a time when past practice has to be corrected.
Well, I can tell
And
you,
we hope to do that, and not just for this contract.
Well, and this is why I would like to talk to someone at the Bureau, because I can tell you if we're doing something that is not complying with the law, and I'll look right at your camera and say that, if we're doing something that's not complying with the law in connection with our processes, I would certainly want to know that, and I would certainly do everything I could to make sure that what we're doing is complying with the law. I have no intention to subvert what the law is around data practices and around what kinds of information has to be available prior to presentation to the executive committee.
Right, and that's great. So what we'll do is we'll email you this material, but we'll also copy the city clerk's office. We work with them frequently, and because we do regular data practice requests, and we would be happy to share that, share this information with them.
Thank you for your time.
Yes, thank you for your time.
Thank you for your interest. And I'll give this to you. So if you want to send it email to me.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll get a letter.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful day.
Let's go back out in the hall.
Very good.
Let's come on outside before we talk. Given that everybody's going to have our in their office. Yes. Let's slide down this way.
You want to do a report back from that?
Sure. What do you all think?
Let me grab this.
So what do you all
I
think?
support that.
What do you all think of what happened? And she came out to talk to you all.
Yes, and it's really important that public officials understand that, the community has a right to know what they're thinking about, has a right to communicate our concerns with them, and, not to hide behind some glass door somewhere. They should just come out and be real people and have a conversation, so I appreciate that she did. I'm still concerned about what she's saying, because I think she's still in the mindset that the public doesn't belong in this arena, and we do. And we have to help her understand that she cannot violate the law to keep us out of it. So I think we made some headway in that direction, and I'd like to give other people a chance to speak as well. What do you all think? And you too.
As somebody who visited Mike Freeman's office 21 out of 22 times back when we were having Freeman Fridays, he routinely, never once did he come out to meet with us, which was really disappointing. And so I'm glad that Laura came out and met with us. At the same time, I feel like that's kind of the bare minimum expectation of what should have occurred. So I'm pleased that she met with us, but at the same time, I'm limiting the amount of credit for that because that's just an expectation that we should be allowed to have.
Yes, I think this represented progress, and it's good that we waited for her to come out. We have to keep in mind, however, that many of the decisions that have kept us out of this process have already been made. We missed the negotiation sessions, and we can never get that back. So those decisions have already been made. I'm hopeful that if we let the city know, that we know, that they know, that we know, that the laws work this way, that maybe there will be some progress on this short of, lawsuits or any of that kind of thing. So we definitely want to go that direction and negotiate some changes that happen. But past practice by itself is not an excuse. It seems to me that the chief labor negotiator for the city of Minneapolis, who's paid a lot more than I do, should probably know these laws better than I do. Thank you.
Yes, good point. Good point. Anyone else want to say something? Again, thank you so much for being out here, and to everybody who came out today. This is really an important thing because, they somehow think that they can negotiate behind closed doors and that the public has no interest or concerns. And we have every interest and concern. And, Kim, you said earlier that that these contracts we are the stakeholders in these contracts as much as any of these public employees. And when the city council tries to talk about how they can't do anything because the contracts don't let them do it and all this stuff.
There's an opportunity for them to say no, we're not approving this.
Don't approve a contract that ties your hands. It's nonsensical, and we're done with that. So they need to be done with it too.
That's right.
So thank you again. Thanks everybody. Thanks.
Anybody else want to talk about it?
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you. You too. I'll be right back. This is Nico from Unicorn Ride. Thank you all for joining. And Jen, thank you for the back end. We are here live in Minneapolis. What we just witnessed was, hold on a second. All right. I had to finish the thing real quick. So there's City Hall. Here's the federal courthouse. City Hall is where the Minneapolis Police Department is sort of housed. The police chief is. There was a new contract negotiations for the Minneapolis police. That has sort of gone in secret. You heard all about it. Check out the stream. We'll try to get a post up about some information about this. We have the correspondence from the city and from the community group that was fighting for transparency within the Minneapolis Minneapolis Police Department contract. Now they have recommendations that they've created to tell the negotiator some certain facts that they would like. The city also, I just want to real quick say, the city in 2019 released an internal audit, and they also found that they need to create improved tracking of off-duty hours for Minneapolis police officers. They need to make the off-duty work requirements stronger. They need the work requirements strengthened, and they need more oversight and monitoring for compliance. Those were the three main high priority things from the city that did an audit on police hours and off-duty hours. Now, this group here specifically has three recommendations out of, I think, 16 or so. The three main ones are eliminate officer fatigue, mandatory mental health screenings, and more flexible staffing. Again, this is, and they have quite a few additional recommendations. We'll try to get that up on the internet today, in the next few days. Again, thank you all for joining us. Nico from Unicorn Ride. What this is all about is the Minneapolis Police Department contract negotiations. Public is trying to get some recommendations and some say, and also just trying to get some transparency within the contract negotiations. So again, thank you all for joining us. Nico from Unicorn Ride. Thank you, Jen, from the back end, and other folks from Unicorn Ride in the back end. We're here in the Public Services Center in Minneapolis, and we're going to take the stream down. Thank you all.